Hello. I have excellent videos on dry fasting with images teaching how I lost 150 pounds watching TV in bed and why I think exercising calories are the wrong approach to weight loss. Dry fasting made half my body weight vanish. Poof. Now for the show about the physics. This is the mathematics of history selected teleology. Are we ideas with Markov blanketed personified souls? The universe is Wigner's friend. No observer stands outside reality. Expectation-weighted collapse, not probability. Random dice selects one coherent history from Everett's many possible worlds, including the past we experience. We select history in quantum mechanics. The universe is Wigner's friend. No observer stands outside reality, and expectation-weighted collapse selects the history we mistake for the past. Revealing reality is shared mental spacetime shaped by all observer expectations across all of spacetime. Why should the Bohren rule and cubism be ruled by now, moments that cannot exist in physics? This channel explores the idealism interpretation of quantum mechanics because faith in outcomes has applied mathematics called cubism. However, expectations across the whole entirety of spacetime are considerations in quantum collapse. This channel looks at the mathematics of idealism, the notion we live in idea format, that you are a personified idea. Now for the presentation. History selected teleology. Hello. I want to make one simple claim, and I want to make it clearly. Quantum collapse does not merely select an outcome, it selects the history. That one shift changes everything and explains all of reality. Most people, when they think about quantum mechanics, focus on the ending. They focus on the result. Was the cat alive or dead? Did the detector click or not click? Which outcome appeared? Who was the observer? But that is too late in the story. You need to understand that if collapse selects only an outcome, then we still do not understand why that outcome fits into one coherent world. But if collapse selects a history, then suddenly many mysteries begin to fall into place. The selected result comes with the selected past required to make that result coherent. That is the idea on this image. Look at the title, History Selected Teleology. The subtitle tells you the whole theme. Collapse selects histories, not just outcomes. That is the heart of this model. Now, look at the center panel with Schrodinger's cat. Before measurement, standard quantum mechanics gives us a superposition. Everywhere. Wave position, all at once. Candidate history is not yet one full-lived history. Like, it's just in superposition. It doesn't have a history in any of those states until after measurement. What we get is not merely an alive or a dead cat. We get the entire history. We get one selected history, a whole coherent chain of events in which that cat was always on the path towards being found alive, or always on the path towards being found dead, with all that entropy that we collapse pre-entropy with our decision. That is a deeper claim than ordinary textbook talk. The point is not simply that we observe one result. The point is that when one result is selected, the entire history consistent with that result is selected with it. That is why the cat thought experiment matters so much. The measurement does not just put a label on the present. It selects a coherent storyline in quantum mechanics. And once you see that, teleology is no longer just a philosophy. It becomes physically meaningful. We have to, because if histories are what we select, then the structure of a future state can help determine which past becomes actual. In simple words, the future helps select the past that leads to it. Now, before anyone panics, I'm not saying cartoon time travel. I'm saying something more disciplined. In a block universe view of space-time, a real world is a coherent four-dimensional history. If collapse selects among candidate histories, then the winning history must be coherent from end to end. That means later states matter to which earlier path is retained by us. This is why teleology belongs here. Not teleology as superstition, teleology as history selection. Now, look at the right side of the box. It reminds us of the mathematical shift. The standard Born rule gives quantum amplitudes their ordinary weight. Fine, the part still matters, but the updated view says amplitude alone is not enough. Amplitudes must be combined with observer expectation across all of space-time. That is the correction we must make to the Born rule. Standard quantum theory gives candidate branches. The updated Born rule idea says those branches are not finally weighted by amplitude alone. They are weighted by amplitude plus observer-linked expectation, and that's what selects the history. So collapse is no longer a blind dice roll. Collapse becomes weighted history selection, not random. And that is where cubism becomes useful, but cubism is incomplete. Cubism already recognized that expectation matters. It's already moved away from the fantasy that quantum theory is just dead external machine unrelated to the observer. That was a step, but cubism keeps expectations too private, too local, too personal. This interpretation expands that. Expectation is not merely a private betting attitude inside one skull. Expectation is part of a shared space-time-wide process of history selection using Markov blankets within Carl Friston mathematics. So cubism is not discarded. It is made physical in this model. But we need to adopt a new Born rule. That is why the slide says cubism expanded from private expectation to shared history selection. Now, if you look in the center row of images, plant, fish, crab, human, this is the teleological creation story in simple form. If history is selected, then biological history is not merely a random uphill stumble. It becomes the visible trace of a selected development. We do not merely inherit a blind past. We participate in selecting the ancestors that produced us. That is why I say we had to live as plants to learn breathing. We had to learn fish to learn movement and gills. We had to learn crabs to learn, because we expect thumbs as human. And that's not just a zoology lesson. It is a compressed statement of how teleology makes sense if we create our path, if we select our path. Current quantum mechanics agrees that observers are needed. 36% of quantum mechanics today believe that observers are needed for quantum collapse. But they all say random. They all say random. Nobody says that there's weighted observer collapse like what I teach in my other videos. And in this one, this is an expansion of it on the teleology aspects of observer-based collapse, or based on weight. The point is this: if future organisms require certain capacities, then selected history favors ancestral lines in which those capacities are gradually built. We're thought forms. We're not humans. Breathing, movement, grasping, sight, coordination, sexuality, memory, social life, these do not appear as disconnected accidents in a dead world, the materialistic world. They appear as stages in a selected ancestral history. The future expectation helps select ancestral history. That is a sentence written across the middle of the slide, and I think one of the most important sentences here. History is selected because it explains why teleology looks real in life. It explains why organisms seem directed, why biology seems so full of aim, why sex drive is so powerful, why reproduction is not just chemistry but destiny, wearing chemistry as a costume. If future humans expect to exist, then selecting history must include the breeding lines that produce them. So sex drive is no longer just an awkward animal reflex. It is part of the machinery by which selected history keeps its future coherent. We have to breed because future humans expect to exist. That is why one of the mysteries listed on the right is sex drive and reproduction. The same idea extends to thought and expectation. If expectation helps weight collapse, then thoughts are not just decorative fog floating above matter. Thoughts are part of the selection landscape. Thoughts are the modified Born rule. They're a part of the way history becomes stabilized. this video explains thoughts themselves also. Selecting history with quantum collapse via choice across every Planck-like moment across all of space-time explains all of reality, and not by childish magic. Not I imagine a dragon and now one appears in my garage. Minds contribute to which histories remain coherent and which histories do not. So when people ask what selected history solves, the answer is everything. Everything. It solves biology, memory, physics. It solves many worlds. It solves Frottiger-Renner. It resolves evolution in idealism format. It resolves sex drive. There's so much. You can't. There's all aspects of existence are addressed by this video. So, well, and my other videos. So, this addresses the measurement problem because it explains why one world is experienced. It addresses outcome selection because outcomes are no longer random leftovers. It addresses history selection directly because the whole framework is built around that. It gives a stronger observer role in quantum mechanics. It makes sense of Wigner's friend because observers are not inside the chain, not outside it. It deepens Schrodinger's cat because the cat's whole history is selected. It gives a route to retrocausality without using 1981 DeLoreans or faster than light speed because coherent future states help constrain which past survives. We're choosing the past. That's why a song can come on the radio after you start thinking about it, because we choose a past in which that song was organized by the disc jockey. You can manifest a parking space after you pull in the parking lot because your expectations and positive attitude about getting a parking space manifested and made someone leave the parking lot 10 minutes earlier because he remembered she was late for her Pilates meeting. This offers a completion to the Born rule that fixes quantum mechanics once and for all. And it can't be debunked because this is how reality works. And it makes cubism physically embedding expectation in shared history. But the expectations are also need to be weighed from the future. This brings consciousness into physics rather than banishing it as woo. It explains memory beyond the brain because brain memory is woo, actually. Because if histories are selected globally, memory need not be merely local tissue storage. Brain body isn't temporal enough. It's too small for the temporal mechanics of our history selected mind system. This explains continuity of self because the self tracks a coherent selected history, not just a series of isolated brain state. It grounds teleological creationism. Intelligent design. We literally lived as crabs to intelligently design our own thumbs. We design our lungs by living the lifetime of plants. That's intelligent design 101, living a life of a plant to learn your lungs. There's not like an external, someone's setting light bulbs down, making someone just go poof, you got thumbs. No, you had to earn your thumbs. It's a merit badge. Your selected development path. This explains evolutionary direction. It explains sex drive and reproduction. It ties together thought and expectation, teleology, and it restores purpose in biology. Teleology, it gives a meaningful time in a block universe where past and future belong to one selected whole. This is a lot of mysteries that history selection can solve if it is taken seriously. It reorganizes the whole structure of physics and biology. Let me say the core idea as simply as possible. Standard quantum theory tells us what can happen. The updated Born rule says that what actually becomes real depends on more than amplitude alone. Observer-linked expectation helps weight which branch becomes the lived world, and when one branch wins, it wins not as a bare ending, but as a whole coherent history. And it is selected history. And once the whole coherent history is what becomes real, teleology follows naturally. Why? Because a coherent history is not built only from the past forward, it must also fit the future it leads into. If history culminates in beings with lungs, hands, sex drives, memory, language, and long-term expectation, then selected history favors ancestral development. That's what leads to us. So no, teleology is not outdated superstition. Teleology is what history selection looks like when viewed biologically or from the outside. And intelligent design in this framework is not crude miracle talk. It is not cartoon inventor snapping fingers and attaching organs to animals with lightning bolts. It is a gradual selection of histories in which needed forms are built. And that is why I call it intelligent design. I hope that term isn't already taken. You collapsed a history where you assembled yourself like Frankenstein and his monster. Design is real, but is distributed across selected history. And that also means life is not pointless. There's purpose in every life to learn biology or personality. Purpose in biology is not an illusion. It is a lived signature of a history that is being selected for coherence. And the old story says dead particles first, meaning later. This story says coherent history first, and matter is the stabilized appearance of that selection. Schrodinger's cat teaches us that collapse cannot be understood merely as an outcome. It has a history attached. The Born rule must be updated because amplitude alone does not explain why one world is lived, and there's obviously no now moments that we can take seriously. Cubism helps by recognizing expectation, but expectation must be made shared and physical. When expectation helps weight collapse, when history is selected, and when history is selected, teleology is natural. And that explains why life looks directed, why organisms look built towards end, why sex drive matters, why thought matters, why memory and selfhood persist, why plants, fish, crabs, and humans can be read as stages in a selected ancestral path towards our bipedal advanced humanhood, all fancy. So the message of this slide is not complicated. Collapse selects histories. Continuous collapse across space-time. So this is just a cute little quantum event story. It becomes the theory of all of reality. People picture collapse like a magic camera flash. Before measurement, many possibilities. After measurement, one result. But that's not the end of the experiment. No. In this interpretation, collapse is not one dramatic little laboratory sneeze. Wigner's friend, after Wigner's friend, after Wigner's friend, after Wigner's friend, all adding expectations toward the final outcomes. Collapse is continuous, ongoing. We are being collapsed by the future as we collapse our ancestors with expectations. A history selection principle. A principle. We can apply this across the board. Reality is being selected and stabilized all the time across space-time. Look at the left side of the image. The first idea is simple. Every possible history carries weight. Not just from one observer, not just from one detector, not from one now moment, because in relatively the magic universal now moment is already dead. His funeral was in 1905. Einstein sent flowers. Each observer moment adds a little weight to a possible history, a Planck length moment to history. One moment says, this branch fits. Another says, this branch keeps working. Another says, this history stays coherent. So every candidate history carries a CPT symmetry ledger, a cosmic accounting sheet, something to weigh expectations against. You have to have something to weigh expectations against in this model. Some histories gain support, some lose support, some stay bright, some fade into nice try. That is the math of continuity. This is the mathematics of idealism. The bright branch on the diagram says bright because it keeps getting reinforced. The weaker branches are still mathematically available, but they are not the world we live in. They're candidates. Candidates are not winners. This is not random dice. This is reinforcement in the most democratic process of them all. That matters because it explains why reality feels stable. We are not waking up every 3 seconds in a universe where your coffee is a raccoon and your left shoe is the prime minister. One history stays coherent because it keeps receiving support. Markov blanket style. That is a continuous collapse, not one click, not one detector, not one lonely observer in a lab coat squinting at a machine or the machine itself. A whole distributed structure because every observer, every loci of comparison is collapsing, giving global consistency. Now, look at the upper right box. Thought is the locally experienced output of ongoing weighted selection. A thought is not brain related. It is not little meat sparks having a private parade. In this model, thought is what history selection feels like from the inside. The temporal mechanics of a mind make brain body too small for memory or mind. This is an idealist interpretation where life is a dreamscape. Thought is a local experience of a branch being weighted. These mathematical weights are thoughts themselves, presented to you for your own choosing. My model explains the thoughts we think as mathematical weights based on that Hilborn rule or an updated Born rule. Expectations matter because expectations is not just, I hope I got a pony. Expectation is structured orientation toward a possible history. It is the inside face of a selection pressure. That is why the Born rule has to be updated. The standard Born rule gives the local quantum weight, but it does not explain why one history becomes the lived world, as opposed to Everett many worlds. So we add the missing piece. Observer expectation across space-time can give us the one world that we know and love. This math creates a history selection process that explains all of mind, memory, creationism, and even our afterlife in a satisfying way. Born rule gives local weight, observer expectation gives global weight. Measurement selects the coherent history, continuous collapse keeps it alive. That is the whole engine. Now, here is where the block universe matters. Past, present, and future are not separate marbles dropping one by one from the sky. They belong to one four-dimensional structure. So when a history is selected, it is not just a present outcome being chosen. The whole matching history is selected with it. That is the retrocausal part. It's not cartoon time travel. Not sending a text to your grandfather when he was alive. Something cleaner. The present result must belong to a coherent past and future. So the selected outcome also selects the history. That makes it make sense. Schrodinger's cat is not just alive or dead. It is which entire cat history became real is the key to understanding teleology and reality. A live cat means one deep coherent history. Dead cat means another coherent history. Collapse selects the storyline, not just the final scene. That is why teleology becomes possible later. If future states are part of the selected history, then future expectations can help weight the past that leads to it. And that applies to all aspects of life, not just evolution. Now, Cubism deserves a nod here. Cubism was clever enough to say, the observer matters. It treats quantum probabilities as tied to an agent's expectations. Good. Gold star. Finally, someone letting the observer back into the building. But Cubism keeps expectation too small, too private, too my personal bet, too linear, too now. Weighted observer collapse says no expectation is not just a private casino ticket in one skull. Expectation is physically weighted across all space-time. It selects all history. So Cubism points at the door. This model patches Cubism by altering the Born rule. Many futures may seem from our present to be mathematically available. Repeated support keeps one history coherent. Experience follows the history that stays reinforced, but weighted by an updated Born rule to include expectation weight. That is why one world appears instead of many, the one world we know and love, and not because the universe rolled dice. That God doesn't play dice. Not because every possible world must exist either, as preacher Sean Carroll would have you believe. Because that would mean there's an immortal cat out there somewhere, because every time cat tried to die, then Schrodinger's cat would be alive in some other alternate universe and the cat could never ever die. So there's like so many paradoxes with many worlds. So that's less physics and just cosmic hoarding and fantasy. And it's not because collapse is just a magic button that nobody can find. There's a reason for collapse based on the new updated Born weight. If we add expectation from across the block universe, that fixes quantum mechanics once and for all. One world appears because one history gathers enough coherent weighted support to become that world. That is weighted observer collapse. Quantum mechanics gives possible histories. Think of it that way. The Born world gives us the first weight. Observer expectation adds the missing weights. Measurement selects the coherent history. Continuous collapse sustains it. Thought is the inside experiment of that process. Every word in this sentence has its own Markov blanket, personification, soul. Markov blanket, personification, and soul all mean the exact same thing. So the universe is not a dead machine accidentally watched by our confused meat. Reality is selected. History is selected. Selected. That is the answer to everything. History is reinforced by every collapse. And the world we live in is the branch that kept winning. Then we wake up to dream again. Selected history produces teleology. Teleology explains biological purpose, intelligent design, and the continuity of life. That is my model of teleology. Thank you. Be blessed. Blessed be.